where am I taking this audience on this story? If it doesn't fit that and there's some weird story about bird watching, no offense to bird watchers, I might pull it. Birdcasters,
or bird tracks.
bird track certified. We'll leave this in because it's actually relevant.
It is relevant.
The next piece that I know we want to talk about is editing. So after we have done our interview or recorded our episode, editing. Let's talk about this from a philosophical standpoint, because I know we don't want to get into the weeds about what tools you use. I mean, if we bring up tools, that's cool, of course. But how do you approach editing, Marion?
I think this is so interesting because for me, my background is television. And when you're editing for television, it's really a specific way of thinking. And that is like an assembly. And so the background I have for editing, I describe it to people as if you maybe made these collages when you were a kid and you would take a magazine and you'd cut out words from a bunch of different magazines and then you would put them all together and make a thing. So a lot of people think of editing as I take out the bad stuff. I don't think about editing that way. I think about editing as choosing the good stuff and assembling it. And so with my podcast, I don't get really into that, but I still think about editing as a critical part of how you form your content. So for my podcast, Grounded Content, my editor does a really good job, and I will often do a 45-minute interview that turns into a 25-minute show. And there's a lot of restructuring and reframing, and I'm always thinking about what did I get the guest to say. One of the things that I do a lot is I'll ask a question. And so the question might be, how do you think about creativity? But then there might be a long explanation where I would say, how do you think about creativity, Paula? And by that, I mean, how do you think about it in the context of creating your podcast? Because my audience is really curious about X, Y, and Z. And then you'd answer. My editor would take out that whole description. But it's necessary to give you the information you need to answer the question in the right context. But the audience doesn't need to hear any of that. So I'm always thinking about structurally editing the show. But having said that, the work I do for Spartan, which is, how I sort of really got into the podcasting space, that's very straightforward. I mean, that's really just cleanup. There, it's like, if something's embarrassing, take it out. If there's too long of a pause, just make things flow a little smoother. That's 90% of the editing. Put on the open, put on the close, just put the pieces together. So how I think about editing. And then, of course, there's, I love the idea of really like building a narrative and editing that way. But I think a lot of editors in the podcast world think of editing as applying EQ and taking out the ums.
There's two things there for me, which is I'm probably a little bit more of a complementary style to yours. I'm not going to say it's the opposite, but with the work that I do, because we always have different opinions, I feel like these are the best conversations. I often am taking something, and just like you said, it's important to get rid of like kind of the unnecessary pieces. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm definitely of the opinion that everything needs to be edited.
Yes.
And if you're listening to a show and you're like, but it's so clean, I'm sure they just had a great conversation. No, what you're hearing and not hearing is a good editor that pulled out those extra bits, the embarrassing side chatter, like the unnecessary direction they headed.
This goes back to what we talked about what's the purpose, what's in and what's out, right? And some of that gets decided in the edit.
Right. Yeah. And that's why it's really important when you go in to look at it. I do what I call a content pass and a pass when I'm editing, meaning I go over the entire content and I look for the narrative. And I pull out what isn't adding to that. What isn't, we talked about this in your episode as well, the arc. What's the beginning, middle, and end? Where am I taking this audience on this story? If it doesn't fit that and there's some weird story about bird watching, I might pull it. I think there's something there about always tying it back to your mission. So do the pass, see if this is what's in and out, like you were saying. And then I also do the pass, which is removing ums and ahs, getting rid of filler gaps, equalizing it out.
It's important that it doesn't hurt your ears, that it's not wasting your time. But I'm thinking this episode, and you're guesting on my show, Grounded Content, both of those, they don't have a narrative. And so for me, I do a lot of that kind of editing as well. And there it's really how do you convey the information clearly? Same process. You always need to be thinking about it from the point of view of the listener. How do you make sure that the right stuff is in and the right stuff is out?
I also think there's opportunities when you're in post, when you're doing editing, if as the host, you didn't lead up to a question and the guest has just wandered into a territory that's super interesting, it's also okay to jump right back on your mic, get your equalizing about the same and throw in a question. Because I think there's also something to be said for you're still as the host, the one that's mostly in control of a conversation. And if somebody's wandered off and it doesn't tie in, or the audience has to make a bizarre jump from this point to this point, and they're not going to, it's okay to lead them or do kind of an NPR style, voiceover of next. I find that Marion starts talking about equalizing in very technical terms. Let's hear what she has to say.
No, I agree. That's so helpful. And it's not pretend or fake. It's important. You have to help the listener get there. Now, I'm thinking about this. Maybe we should be talking about how, because a lot of podcasters won't be the editors. So, how should people think about working with an editor?
Ooh.
Oh, you're supposed to be asking the questions. This is your show. Sorry.
No, but I like this. This is good and it fits right in. I think just being cognizant of the fact that there is an editor. If you're the interviewer or the host, and if we started talking over, of course we can do split tracks and all that magic for sure. Or if we just start talking over each other and getting raucous, just saying, let's do that again. Hey, editor, we're going to do this again. So they can just get a clean take on it. If there's a dog barking, put yourself on mute. Like, I think there's a lot of things that you can help in the background that the audience is not ever going to know even happened and doesn't need to know happened. But like, keep in mind that for them to get you a really good, solid episode, you're going to have to jump through a few hoops to get there for them. Just like that. I just mispronounced a word and I said it again so there can be a clean take.
Yeah, exactly. Starting clean again. Now, in my case, I had a background as an editor. So for me, it was teaching my editor what I wanted, what my idea of editing was. For some people, the editor is going to ask them those questions because the editor is going to have more experience. In my case, I was working with an experienced editor, but she doesn't know me or my style. And so in the beginning, there were a lot of notes and a lot of transcripts. And I would literally say, sometimes it's, hey, there's these 3 topics that are important and only put in the other stuff as you need it to get between them. Or, those kind of general stuff. But in the beginning, as she's getting to know me, I might also literally go through a transcript and say, take out this paragraph, take out this chunk. And that is more to give her an idea of the level of detail or the kind of editing I'm looking for. And then now I do almost nothing. She knows she knows my personality. If you have a good editor, they learn how you want to work with them.
I feel like a couple of my original or initial interactions with an editor, I realized I was going to have to train them, but then I was kind of frustrated, I'll be honest. Like, they didn't get it. How come they didn't get it?
They didn't read your mind.
Right. They didn't have a crystal ball. So I think understanding that giving somebody, several episodes and working with them, sure, it's going to be a little bit of an investment, but the right person will get it. But maybe the language, if you're hearing especially if you're on and no judgment really, right? If you're on Fiverr or something like that, and read the description, or if you're interviewing an editor, ask them exactly what it is that they do for that price. Because a lot of them, it really is, I remove a few filler words, gap spaces, equalize, and I add your intro and outro. And maybe that is what all that you want.
And I would add to that, that's not a judgment. You also can't expect someone that's charging you a level that they can do in that amount of time that they're going to reframe your whole story and build a narrative. It's unrealistic to expect that.
Fully agree. I think understanding what you want and what your expectations are, and then looking for that right resource is great. And I love that you said that you have gotten to the point where you trust this person completely, because I know when my team and I edit for clients, we are at a place, at least with one client, where no, they don't even get there's no feedback. We just roll it. We don't even let them review. They don't ask to. We're at that point. I've also worked with people where it's like you get these notes. Oh my gosh, if you're doing this past the first 5 or 6, maybe look for a different editor because you're not on the same page or you're frankly being a pain in the ass. But I have gotten notes from clients.
Maybe we should get my editor on and find out if I am a pain in the ass, because I might be.
You're not. I bet you're not. If you're letting it go without these but, like, timestamp numbers, like, remove this word, and we've done 2 rounds and we're on a 3rd no, 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 no. Please move on or stop that behavior.
So, there was one episode where I did get really in the weeds, but I think it worked. So I had a funny, like a kind of a goofy back and forth with my guest, and the editor took it out, which normally would be right because she was trying to be efficient with the information. And I said, see if it works. It seemed funny at the time. So I asked the editor, could we put the part where she says it's kind of a running joke after I made my little joke? So it seemed like I was being funny and she thought I was funny, right? That worked, and that is a level that you can, like, you really can move stuff around, but I probably was being a little bit of a pain, but I had an idea that it could work, and also I was being vain. I didn't wanna look like I was being so extra
I think
and
that's
not funny.
different. Yeah. I think that if I'm getting those kind of comments back from a client of, "Ooh, you know what would work better?" I think that's co-collaboration. The level that I'm talking about is people that have already literally listened to something twice and sent over copious notes twice and then want to nitpick other little things. It's like, I mean, I don't know. I think the level is that you do learn to trust an editor,
Yeah.
and learn to take their lead and trust that they also want what is best for your show. And if you don't have that relationship, go find it because I think that's really important from kind of the philosophical standpoint for editing.
And know that editing means a lot of different things, and you really need to have that conversation up front about what it is you're looking for in an editor.
Yes, I think that's really good. Yeah. My throat just made a weird noise there.
I heard that.
I know, it was bizarre.
Is that staying in or is that coming out?
I don't know. We have many blooper reel items. This is gonna be fun on the YouTube.